Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I hope everybody had a great lunch with all the boba and all the amazing food. Today, I will be serving as the moderator for today's student panel. My name is Marco Widodo. And the way that this is going to work is we have three amazing Stanford students here and three dear friends of mine. We have Tiffany, Carissa, and Yiting. I will be introducing them a little bit first, and then each of them will have a little bit of a presentation talking about kind of Taiwanese American engagement on campus and beyond. And then we will be opening it up for questions. So before we get started, though, I was asked by Cheryl, actually, to introduce myself a little bit, even though these three are really the stars of today's panel, and kind of explain why I'm here. So I myself am not Taiwanese. I'm Indonesian. I'm a poli-sci student here at Stanford. I'm a second-year sophomore, and I did have the wonderful opportunity of going to Taiwan for spring break with a couple of my friends. And while I was there, I got the email from, I think, the FSI newsletter that, oh, APARC is launching this new Taiwan program. And I was like, huh, what are the chances? What's the coincidence? And so I reached out to Professor Shin and asked him, how can I be involved? How can I learn more about this program? And lo and behold, somehow I am now serving as the moderator here. But yeah, as I said earlier, I myself am not Taiwanese, nor am I an expert on Taiwan. But I, like many of you, am an interested scholar who wants to learn more about the Taiwanese experience and learn a lot more from our wonderful students here today. So we have Tiffany up first. So Tiffany is currently a sophomore as well, like me, and she's Taiwanese, and of course, I mean all three of them are Taiwanese. Tiffany is currently an undergraduate sophomore. She also worked as a research assistant at APARC, and then we have Carissa, who is a junior here at Stanford, and then we also have Yiting, who is a third-year PhD student in the history department here. So without further ado, please give it up for Tiffany.
Okay, so first I would like to congratulate APARC for launching the Taiwan program. This is something that I've been very excited for maybe like a month and a half. I first heard about it when Dr. Karen Eggleston told me about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so amazing to see our institution recognize Taiwan and wanting to contribute to the research and initiatives. So first I would like to congratulate this amazing day. So yeah, my name is Tiffany, and I'm currently a sophomore majoring in engineering management and human-centered design. And additionally, I'm also the 2024 Miss Asia USA, becoming the first ever Taiwanese to earn this title. Yay! Thank you. In 2022, I served as a Miss Taiwanese American. And additionally, sort of like on campus, last summer I worked as an intern at Intimate Inc., which is like a leading artificial intelligence provider in Taiwan. And then I'm also, like I previously mentioned, a research assistant at APARC. So a lot of my whole journey and the work that I've done related to Taiwan has a lot to do with finding my identity. So I was born and raised here in the United States. I'm from Southern California, and I came from like a Taiwanese family. I grew up primarily with my grandparents speaking like Taiwanese dialect at home, and basically eating Taiwanese food every day. But despite this seemingly strong connection to my roots, I was actually very adrift to in confusion and insecurity about my identity. And in elementary school, I actually faced a lot of discrimination for my Asian American identity. So there was this one particular distinct moment where in elementary school, I used to play what many of you guys might know as like the guzhen, right? Mm-hmm. It's like Chinese zither. And I used to play it basically for every talent show at school. And it was something I was very proud of, but this one particular time in middle school, one of my classmates came up to me and they said, like, why are you playing this ugly, like, Oriental instrument and wearing basically the qipao? And even though this was just one instance, from that moment on, I became actually very ashamed of my Asian identity. It became something I wanted to constantly shelve away and hide. And additionally to this, like from this experience, it sort of silenced me also as a person. It became very difficult to stand up for who I was and what I believed in, to the point that in an educational setting and many like classroom discussions, it was really difficult for me to contribute and basically ask questions or state like my opinions. And so after high school, this was something that I wanted to work on, and I wanted to learn more about particularly my Taiwanese heritage and find more reconnecting to my roots. So that's when I decided to participate in my first ever pageant, Miss Taiwanese American. And so I know many of you guys might be thinking, like, why pageantry? And at the moment, at that time, I was just thinking, you know, it's something very different from everything I've ever done. I used to be very academically focused. So I thought, why not just try something new and at the same time learn more about my Taiwanese heritage? But what I didn't know was that this journey would be completely life-changing for me and very fulfilling. And it took me on this incredible journey that has gotten me to like where I am today. Advocating for the Taiwanese American community not only allowed me to basically empower the Taiwanese community, but also became a catalyst for my own personal growth. So throughout the entire year, I would attend all these events where I was able to meet like Xiaomei-Ching and President Tsai Ing-wen, which was such an honor. I was able to MC for many fundraisers and galas, which helped me with, you know, using my voice again. And you know, I was a guest speaker on some like talk and some radio and talk shows. And ultimately through this, I was able to do a lot of community engagement and public outreach. And so it was through these experiences that allowed me to rekindle that, became a part of me that rekindled the Taiwanese identity and became, I was able to really connect with my Taiwanese heritage a lot more. And so it was, this journey became really fulfilling to me, and I was able to embrace a part of myself that I really overlooked before. And this journey not only strengthened my connection to my Taiwanese identity, but also taught me like the power of, you know, the power of using my voice and not being afraid to stand up for what I believe in. And so after that, I decided to also participate in Miss Asia USA. So the pageant was just in November last year. And so the reason why I chose to compete in Miss Asia USA was not just to continue being an ambassador for Taiwan, but to also empower those who went through a similar journey of facing discrimination and feeling as if they're not good enough. I felt a need to go beyond the Taiwanese American community, because something I noticed was that a lot of the Taiwanese Americans that I know, we like to stay within our local community and not really expand like globally or internationally. We like to stay within our community. And so as Miss Taiwanese American, I realized that this was something that I wanted to change. I think that it's very important for us as Taiwanese to not just stay within our community, but to really go into the mainstream to bring our voices out. And so that was why I decided to do Miss Asia USA. I wanted to show, so recently for spring break, I traveled back to Taiwan for the first time since I won this title. And I want to share a short like news segment that I think sort of encapsulates the work I do for Taiwan and my mission pretty well.
When Taiwan Plus spoke to Tiffany Chang last year, she held the title of Miss Taiwanese American 2022. Since then, she's ascended to the throne of Miss Asia USA 2024, the first person to win the title representing Taiwan.
Throughout my journey of being Miss Taiwanese American 2022, I was always, within the Taiwanese American community, and I really enjoyed all the projects I got to work with. So I really wanted to participate in Miss Asia USA to really bring Taiwan's name in the mainstream.
And part of that mission included teaching the other 50 Miss Asia USA contestants about the country.
A lot of delegates there, they didn't really know Taiwan, or Taiwan in general. And so being able to tell them about, our food, our culture, our heritage was a really memorable experience.
Being a pageant queen isn't just about glitz, glamour, and evening dresses. It's more about responsibility and representation. Now, wearing a bigger crown, the scope of her work becomes much greater.
So I'm now not just an ambassador for Taiwanese American community, but as for the Asian American community as a whole, celebrating, the diverse Asian cultures. For example, for Lunar New Year, I was in the Tet, Vietnamese, festivals.
Tiffany already knows a thing or two about responsibility. She's a double major at Stanford University, a research assistant at the school, and she founded her own nonprofit, Mad Hatter Knits.
Mad Hatter Knits is a nonprofit organization dedicated to supplying knit hats to premature babies in the neonatal intensive care unit and empowering pregnant women.
Tiffany is focused and grounded, staunchly dedicated to becoming a role model beyond her Miss Asia title. At university, she's studying engineering, a field dominated by men.
Women in STEM it's a very male-dominated area, and so I just also wanted to inspire, some other young girls out there that they can pursue STEM or fields that may not necessarily be the most welcoming.
Tiffany already has 2 crowns to her name. At just 20 years old, she's accomplished a lot already, but her story is only just beginning. With so many possibilities ahead of her, it's safe to say the world can come to expect great things from Tiffany Chang.
James Lin and Leslie Liao for Taiwan Plus.
Yeah, so just a very short segment. Thank you. But although pageantry can seem very just about glamour and everything, for me personally, it wasn't really about that. It was really about finding my own personal voice again and reconnecting with, not just the Taiwanese community, but the Asian community as a whole, and really fostering, advocating that, unity and diversity is really important. And so, that aligns with, APARC's message here and the launch of, or celebrating today, basically. So moving on to my life as a student at Stanford, last summer I had the privilege of interning at Intimate Inc. as part of the Stanford Global Studies program. And so here I immersed myself basically in the intersection of technology and a little bit of business. I managed their competitive analysis across their software development. I developed some of their strategic digital marketing initiatives to enhance their user-centric feature development. And what was really interesting, the previous panel was talked about AI and biotech. And so that was really interesting because we see a lot of the time now, ChatGPT, all of these amazing developments in artificial intelligence, but it's also really important to think about more of the user-centric and making it more ethical. And so I thought the previous panel that highlighted that was really interesting. So in addition, like I said, I'm also a research assistant currently at APARC alongside Dr. Karen Eggleston. And so here I've been able to delve in a little bit into Taiwan's health economics. I do a little bit of writing literature reviews, a little bit of data analysis. But as I've done more and more work, what I've really realized is that there's not a lot of published research about Taiwan, or even a lot of data at the moment. I see constantly a lot about, Korea, Japan, but there's not as much about Taiwan. So I think that's something that, the launch of this program will really be able to contribute to. I wanted to end on this note because during spring break, I had the honor of having a private meeting with President Tsai Ing-wen. And this trip was definitely the highlight. This meeting was definitely the highlight of my entire trip. And she actually, one thing that I wanted to highlight was that she emphasized the reliance of my generation to raise awareness and promote Taiwan's rich culture and contributions. And so I think that really highlights the goal of also the Taiwan program here is to continue to contribute to the research that we have and making more people here in like the Stanford community and beyond like more aware of like what we have to do and some of the research. And so I'm really grateful to share my experiences that have shaped my identity and the opportunity to be here today and to celebrate the launch of this amazing initiative. And I think it really underscores like the essence of why the APARC Taiwan program is really so crucial, because it basically is serving as a bridge between not just the Stanford community, student community here, but also the greater Taiwanese community. And so, yeah, thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carissa Cheng, and I am a junior here at Stanford studying international relations with a focus on East and South Asia. And Tiffany and I got to know each other really this year through a series of what I would call fortuitous events. I've been part of Stanford's Taiwanese Cultural Society for many years now, and in the fall we celebrated her Miss Asia USA historic achievement, and then both of us took Yi-Ting's history class on modern Taiwanese history, which I will definitely go into because that was a really beautiful experience. And I think just as the cherry on top, this summer, actually, I will be interning in Taipei at the same program that Tiffany did through Stanford Global Studies. So a lot of overlap between our paths, and I'm very grateful to know such an amazing young woman. But through my segment, I'm hoping to give you more of an idea of what connecting to Taiwan looks like here on campus through my academic journey and some of my extracurricular involvements. So as I mentioned, I've been part of Stanford's Taiwanese Cultural Society since my freshman year, and last year I had the honor of serving as the co-chair of this club. And at the beginning of the year, we asked our members, what do you want out of TCS? And the overwhelming answer was community bonding. And we realized that in the wake of COVID and everything else, we really wanted to just provide spaces where students could enjoy good food, learn about Taiwan, speak to each other in English, Mandarin, or Taiwanese, whatever they felt most comfortable with, share memories of Taiwan, ask questions of students who have lived in Taiwan. And so to that end, we host a wide variety of events throughout the year. TCS is most famous for hosting Stanford's annual night market, which is actually open to the public. So if you live locally, our night market this year is Saturday, May 18th. So would love to see you back on campus for that event if you are nearby. We put a lot of work into organizing a night market where Asian student groups from across the campus sell food, and we have performances and a lot of other amazing things lined up for that event. But we also host smaller events for just our club members who work so hard throughout the whole year putting on big events like this. So recently we had an Iron Chef cook-off with the Japanese Student Union. So speaking of solidarity across the Asian American spectrum, it was a wonderful chance to really get to know their club and what they were doing through, our language of love, which is, of course, food. And if you are curious about what TCS does on campus, our Instagram and Facebook is at Stanford TCS. I am the current social media and marketing manager, so just have to put in the plug. But very, very happy and grateful that this group exists, because it's a really wonderful place to make friends and kind of get that sense of home away from home. Another amazing opportunity I had was actually taking a Taiwanese language class here at Stanford. So for me, Taiwanese was really the language of my grandparents. I understood household phrases, but I really struggled to speak it myself. And I was really amazed when I saw that Taiwanese was offered as a language class on campus, not only because I was excited, to acquire a new language, but also just knowing the history that the people of Taiwan were not always allowed to speak Taiwanese in school. And so to have the opportunity to do so now really made me quite emotional, and I think that sort of classroom legitimacy given to the language sort of validates the identity as a whole. And because of that history, the language is kind of dying, and so Stanford's effort to preserve that language by offering this course was really wonderful to see, and Lim Lao Su was amazing, and so this is another really great opportunity that I'm very grateful to Stanford for having. Finally, as I was mentioning before, our wonderful Yi-Ting taught a modern Taiwanese history class this past quarter, and I think my major takeaway from that class was that she not only discussed Taiwan's history of conflict and colonization, but she also really made visible all the activists throughout the years, many of them doctors or students who have fought ceaselessly for the Taiwanese people, and that was really inspiring, because I think those stories don't often get told, and so to have a class dedicated to them was really beautiful. And so some highlights from that class included watching the film City of Sadness, and also we played a video game as a class called Detention, which is a horror video game based on the White Terror period. So Yi-Ting had a very creative syllabus, and would really recommend talking to her about it, because the class was a really fun experience. And actually, while I was taking Yi-Ting's class, I was inspired to start my own research journey. So for the next year, I will be doing an honors thesis for my IR major, investigating how the perception of a China threat has affected generations of Taiwanese families living here in the US, and how that has impacted Taiwanese American identity formation. And for this project, I was really inspired by Wendy Chang's Island X, which we read a little bit of in Yi-Ting's class. And so taking direct inspiration from her, I'll be doing interviews and also reviewing the literature. But as Tiffany mentioned, there is not a lot of research on Taiwan out there. If you search Taiwanese American identity, you can really barely find like 2-3 articles. And so I'm really excited to gather this new data and hopefully be able to present these findings next spring. So thank you so much.
Good job. Thank you, Carissa. So now we're transitioning to the grad student perspective of Taiwan on campus and beyond. So I'm Yi-Ting. I'm currently a third-year PhD student here in the history department. I specialize in the history of the Japanese Empire. My current dissertation focuses on the pre-1945 trans-Pacific migration of Taiwanese, Koreans, and Okinawans from the Japanese Empire to the US Empire. I won't be talking about my research today, but if you're interested, I'm more than happy to talk about this afterwards. Instead, what I wanted to share with you today is my experiences of engaging with Taiwanese communities on 3 levels. So here at Stanford and in the Bay Area and across North America. So before we move on, originally I had a picture of me at a gay bar in Castro because I really wanted to celebrate and share the information with you how Nymphia went, if people know, becoming the first Taiwanese drag queen in RuPaul Drag Race to win the championship this year. So I'm so happy for her. And I also really want to make the point that in recent years, on top of chip wars and national security, queerness has become a significant way through which Taiwan gained international visibility. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so my experience of engaging with Taiwanese community on campus, the bulk of it is my teaching of Taiwanese history class last quarter. And as Tiffany kindly shared her experience, as a student perspective, I wanted to share with you more from the pedagogical lecturer perspective of some of the goals and challenges I faced while teaching and designing a course on Taiwanese history. So I was able to teach this class because my department, the history department, allowed PhD students to apply to design and teach their own course throughout the quarter. So at the time, although teaching a survey course on modern Taiwanese history isn't exactly my research topic, but I feel really committed to do so because I see teaching Taiwanese history as an act of community building, because it means something for students from Taiwanese heritage and students who are motivated to learn about Taiwan to know that the history, the topic of their academic interest or their personal background yields enough relevance and significance to the extent that it deserves to be a freestanding class on campus instead of just 1 week under Chinese history class or 1 week under the Japanese history class. So what I meant when I say that I see teaching Taiwanese history as an act of community building, I'm not saying that I'm creating a clique of students interested in Taiwan or I wanted everyone in class to become best friends or something. It's about how the existence of this type of class itself is a statement through which students with a vested interest who has a stake in Taiwan felt seen and were provided with very real material support for their research in furthering their interest about their heritage and about their interest in Taiwan. So actually, because I'm not a faculty, of course, there is significant limit to my endeavor of this community building. However, I did the best that I can, and because I really went out of my way to provide support for student research, because if students on campus are interested in Stanford history, I'm their best shot for discussing Taiwanese history with them, and I'm not even a faculty, so that's why I continue to work with some of the students on their project even after the quarter, and Carissa being one of them. So that's my personal goal and motivation of teaching Taiwanese history on the meta level. So from my department's perspective, this type of class taught by PhD students were called source and methods. So it's very literal. The goal was to train students to be able to critically analyze and read primary sources and engage with secondary scholarship. So we expose students to a wide variety of historical documents and historical methods. And because of the nature of the type of the course that I taught, it more or less fell into the category of national history. So another key methodological goal of my course was to train students to be able to critically analyze any kind of historical narratives, especially those that had something to do with nation building. So one of the main examples is that in the first day of the class, I showed this timeline of modern Taiwanese history to students. And this is the most common timeline people used in scholarship and also the way Taiwanese history was taught in Taiwan in primary and secondary education. So after walking through students through the contents of the timeline, I try to challenge students by reading this timeline critically. So for example, I ask, why do you think this timeline starts with the Dutch period in the 17th century? Is it because there were no indigenous people before? And when I use indigenous, I'm very specific of the term here. I don't mean any residents in Taiwan. I mean the non-Han Taiwanese residents in Taiwan. And yes, they were in Taiwan long before 17th century, but their experience was not validated as history. And one of the major reasons that Taiwanese history usually started from the Dutch period was because 17th century was the first time we witnessed large-scale Han settler migration in Taiwan. So and even from the way we define what's the beginning of a history period, you see a certain kind of perspective that's very Han-centric and colonizer-centric. And the same goes for the naming of certain historical periods as well. For example, the word Dutch period at the time, however, the Dutch colonizer really only effectively colonized the southern part of Taiwan. So arguably, for those indigenous population resided in northern and eastern part of Taiwan, for them, the Dutch colonizers' governance might not be not that relevant to their lived experience in 17th century. So from the indigenous perspective, the Dutch period could be a misnomer. And the same goes for Ming and Qing period. As you can see, it follows the Chinese dynastic temporal logic. So that's the way I challenge students in cultivating them into reading being very critical of any kind of historical narratives. And there's two goals in this. One is because most of the students in the class are not going to enter academia in the future. So I really wanted to train them into being sensitive to all kinds of non-traditional historical narratives around you in everyday life. So you can see this kind of timeline in every museum you visit. Whenever there's a timeline, there's a certain narrative embedded in it. And we do a lot of image analysis, we do video games, and we do a lot of documentary watching, short novel readings as well. So to be able to read, see historical narratives everywhere is one of the major goals here. Another goal was, well, I think that's the major goal. Okay. And then that brings me to the issue of limitation of sources. So when I was designing this course, one of the major issues was both limitation of source and also limitation of secondary literature. So one of the requirements from my department in designing source and method classes is that half of our assigned reading has to be primary sources. And because we're teaching it to undergrad, it has to be in English. This requirement is very demanding for when you're teaching about a place that's not only colonized by multiple imperial forces, but also most of the colonizers' primary language was not English. So that means it's very challenging for me to find enough English sources, primary sources, especially for the Qing and the Japanese period. So I also, in the first class, I also walked through the syllabus with the students, and after doing that, I asked them to apply this critical lens to my own syllabus that I designed, to ask them to challenge what is lacking in this syllabus, and to kind of push them into thinking the limits and conditions that shape their knowledge production and consumption. So for example, my syllabus did not have enough writing covered by indigenous population and by women, especially in the Japanese colonial period. Also because we only have 10 weeks and I run into like 2 national holidays last quarter. So we could only start from the late Qing period. So those are the limit of knowledge that I really want students to be aware of while teaching this course. So that's the limit of primary source. The limit of secondary scholarship. So I really don't think there's enough quality English literature on Taiwanese history. I can go on and on about how I think Taiwanese history in English is like a generation behind, for example, Korean history, Japanese history, or Chinese history. But what that means, which reflected on the teaching side, is that, for example, I am able to point out to students what are the limits and problems of the current, for example, timeline or current historical narrative. But I don't have enough scholarship support to provide students a substantive alternative perspective. That requires more archival work and scholarship. So that's really something we need to work on in the future. Okay. And this is a picture that I think is one of the highlight of the course is when I take students to Hoover and look through some of the Taiwanese collection that we have here. So me and the Chinese language archivist at Hoover, Amanda, we curated this session together. So we reviewed through many of the Taiwanese collection at Hoover, and we pulled out some of the materials that we covered in class that seemed interested to students as well. So we have images, photos, postcards from the Japanese colonial period to the immediate post-war. We have the George Kerr papers pulled out, and we also have corresponding letters of political prisoners during White Terror period in the Tian Chaoming collection as well. So that's the left side picture. And on the right side, that photo is not the Taiwanese history class, but that's another example of my personal engagement with about Taiwanese issue on campus. So that was me giving a talk to the undergrad organization FACES, the Forum of American Chinese Exchange, when they invited me to share my experience when I flew back to Taiwan for 3 days to cast my presidential election vote during the quarter. So they were asking very specific questions, like why do you think the third party from Ko Wen-je was able to solicit so many youth votes? I was like, that's a very challenging question. So that's another example of how we're able to engage with the larger community on campus about Taiwan. So then I'm moving on to my community engagement with local organizations. So because the nature of my research, I'm doing a lot of some interviews with Taiwanese Americans and Taiwanese migrants here that led me to be more aware and more engaged with the local community. So for example, the Taiwanese American Federation of North America, which is an umbrella organization that hosts like 8 other organizations under it, and the Taiwanese, North American Taiwanese Women Association being one of them. And recently they held a serious event entitled Identity and Belonging. So for example, we went to Angel Island, that's part of the trip, and also we had a discussion section at the Taiwanese American Center where we discussed with multi-generational Taiwanese American experiences. And on the left side, does anyone recognize what this is? Or anyone want to venture a guess what language this is? Yes, this is Taiwanese. So one of the other activity that I'm engaging with the Taiwanese American Center is that I realized they had a series of Taiwanese classes. And same as Carissa, after taking Li Lao Su's class last year, I was very surprised to realize we have that class, but it's also not enough because it's only a year and you cannot really master a language in a year. So after taking that class, I was very motivated to seek out more linguistic support, and I found these series of Taiwanese classes, and the class I decided to take was to be able to read Romanized Taiwanese that was mostly used in the pre-war period. So for example, this is the newspaper that we're reading for this semester, the Taiwan Husha Gaohuibo. So this is one of the longest running newspaper in Taiwan, which was established by Scottish missionaries that came to Taiwan in the late Qing period. And they were mostly using Romanized Beiweiji, Romanized Taiwanese in the pre-war period and the immediate post-war period. Okay. And lastly, I wanted to introduce you also to another organization effort that I'm engaged in, which is the North American Taiwan Studies Association. And we have some of our members and alumni here, Miki and Ting An as well. So this is an organization also have a deep root with the Taiwanese American community here, which was founded in 1994, and that was after democratization in Taiwan, where you witnessed the first wave of Taiwanese migrant students to the States studying social science and humanities. Before that, students mostly study in STEM. So now, because you have this first group of student scholars, they started to gather and form a North American Taiwan Studies Association, which is very different from other types of academic association that was usually run by faculty. This organization was largely run by PhD students like myself. So I first presented, this conference was they have an annual conference every year, and this was the first time when I was an undergrad, presented my paper and participated in an academic conference. And after that, I participated in an organization effort at different capacity. I served on the board of program commissioner, designing for the annual conference. I helped them organize the podcast program as well. And next year, I'm serving as the incoming president for North American Taiwan Studies Association. And what that entails is that usually we select the location of conference based on the president's affiliation. So next year, it's going to be here at Stanford. So that's why. It's not official yet, but I'm sharing with you this happy information first. And this year, our conference will be June 11th to 13th at New York John Jay College. And our topic this year is Taiwan Studies Matters, Worlding the Contested Frontier. So I will end with this note that the main responsibility of the president is fundraising. So, so if you're interested in supporting Taiwan studies, and I hope I made my case when I talked about the challenge of having not enough Taiwan scholarship in English, then I'm desperate to talk to you afterwards. Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Now, could we give another round of applause for our three speakers? So now we have about 20 minutes left-ish. We're going to launch into a little Q&A. I have a couple of questions prepared for our three panelists today, but we're opening it up to questions from the public as well. So if anybody has any questions, I believe there's a microphone that's going around. So I think just, I guess, raise your hand and the microphone will come around. Yeah, and I'll be joining back on the chair. Oh, that's not it. There we go.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Professor Shin, for this conference and the launch of the Taiwan program, and for the panelists for your interesting perspectives. I graduated many years ago studying international relations from Stanford. my ignorance of Taiwan is a true embarrassment, right? I'm Korean by nationality, and which is why this has been so fascinating to me. And as I listen to you as students, the question that comes to the forefront of my mind is, part of it is your identity and your social and being able to study about Taiwan. But the other flip side of that coin is to make us, general public, much more knowledgeable and understand Taiwan, know what it is. What is the, one of the conversations I was having earlier, what is the Taiwanese identity? I don't know, right? And I think I'd be interested in hear your thoughts on how you can export what you are learning so that the rest of America can actually understand where Taiwan is, what role does it play, you know, the geopolitical importance of it, right? And how your roles can have a broader impact for us people who need to learn more about Taiwan.
I think that's a great question. A lot of the time when people ask me, is it on? Yes. Okay, just making sure. A lot of the time when people ask me, like, what does it mean to be Taiwanese American? I mean, I think that's a very difficult question to answer because I think even within Taiwan, we don't even know ourselves because we have a very complex identity and history that, you know, goes way, like, you know, beyond what we're able to control now. Like, it's all history. But in terms of now, like what we can do, unfortunately, I think a lot of the time when we talk about Taiwan, it's in relation to the geopolitical context, and we don't focus as much on like what really is Taiwanese and what does it mean to be Taiwanese. It's just really in terms of, you know, the political tensions that goes behind it. And so I think in terms of like getting the public to know more about it, like exploring more of, you know, the contributions Taiwan has made and the industries that are now, that Taiwan's now a part of, could be a good angle.
Well, yeah, I was sharing how I think both teaching Taiwanese history on campus and also researching about Taiwan, presenting about Taiwan, and that's really the mission of North American Taiwan Studies Association, is that we actively engage with scholars that do something that's marginally relevant to Taiwan, but then we include them as invited scholars and wanting them to use this as an opportunity through our annual conference to be more engaged and know more about Taiwan, right? So that's from the academic capacity, but also outside of academic, I talk about how I went to a gay bar. That's something I consider myself partially activist scholar in that way. So for example, at Harvard Square, they are doing Taiwan outreach program every month for like over 10 years already, that they just hold signs about Taiwan or the situation internationally, joining UN, this kind of calling. And they would just hand out different pamphlets and explain to people passing by about the situation of Taiwan. So that's another way to be actively engaging, is through different forms of activism, right? Okay. So there's another.
Can I go? Okay. Great talk, by the way. I completely resonate with the two of you. I grew up in Southern California and I totally understand the Taiwanese American dilemma. I guess two questions. One for Yiting. What do you think causes this lack of English literature on Taiwan history? What is the cause of it? We have just so much of a presence as Koreans and maybe not so Japanese, but you know, we have presence in all the academia. We have a lot of industrial presence as well, and so we're apparently we donate a lot to Stanford as well. So there's a good funding there. What is causing that absence, and then what do you think could be gained from more English literature on Taiwanese history? And for Tiffany and Carissa, as a student, and all the things you're dealing with as a Taiwanese American student, because I know I went through them too. You know, what did going back to Taiwan do for you guys? And what do you think? Do you think it'll benefit you in the future as well? The relationship with Taiwan, and what kind of relationship do you expect to have with Taiwan? You know, is it part of your culture? Is it part of your future? Is it part of just knowing your identity, being more comfortable? What does Taiwan represent to you and the presence of Taiwan in your lives?
Okay, so I can start answering the first question. Thank you for asking that. So I think we all know how, especially in the post-war period, how area studies, East Asian studies in the United States is very closely tied to US policy, Cold War, World War II. So we witnessed the wax and wane of Japanese studies, Korean studies, and the rising of Chinese studies as well. A lot has to do with geopolitics centered on US interest, right? So I think that's the larger framework when Taiwan is a minor concern compared to other major power players in the area. And also, I think because the ambiguity of Taiwan's international status also played into that as well. So for example, in international relations, when you rely so much on analyzing the big players of nation state, Taiwan kind of fall into this crack where people are that uncertain. Oh, it's becoming a hot topic in recent years, but when I was an international relation major during my undergrad years, I definitely don't feel so. I definitely don't feel comfortable bringing up Taiwan in my international relation classes. So I think that's one. And I wanted to clarify like what I meant when I said I feel like Taiwan history is like a generation behind when compared to other area studies. For example, my field is Japanese Empire studies. So nowadays when you do Korean history, I think it's no longer viable to do Korean history even during the colonial period to not know Korean. But I think in recent scholarship, we still have scholars producing Taiwanese history without reading Chinese or not speaking Chinese fluently, which I'm not saying that it's not, you couldn't produce quality scholarship in that way, but I think we really need more Taiwan perspective, Taiwanese history in that way. And I think one of the difficulty bridging the bridge is that Taiwanese history studied by Taiwanese scholars based in Taiwan has advanced so much in the past decades, especially after democratization in Taiwan. So the gap between Chinese language Taiwanese history and the English writing literature on Taiwanese history is so wide now. So many things have already been studied, written in the Chinese language. So when Anglophone scholars trying to intervene, they really have to find a different angle, and it's hard to contribute already to that wide range of scholarship. So that's a problem we need to bridge. However, I still think we need something about Taiwanese history written in English because, for example, you come into this issue when you're teaching Taiwanese classes, you'd have enough secondary scholarship to assign to your undergrad students, which can only access in English language, right? So I think, and as I was saying, I think we really need more perspective from indigenous and gender minorities as well. So I think that's the trajectory to go for Taiwanese history scholarship now.
Yeah, I guess I can answer your question about going back to Taiwan. I'm very excited to be studying abroad in Taipei this summer. I think as an international relations major, as I think many of us are actually, I think when Taiwan is discussed, which like in Professor Shin's class it is, I think often it is still from an outside perspective in which Taiwan is this small island being tossed about by big players, and I don't think the question is asked like what do the Taiwanese people actually want. I don't think that is really ever discussed in our classes, and I think that's something I don't really have an answer to. Of course, you can look at elections, but I would really love to go back and just like get a sense of, like here in the US, you have this spectrum of people who, there's on the one hand, Taiwan doesn't matter. And on the other hand, Taiwan is in an existential fight for its life. And like, but like, what is it like actually on the island? How do these things actually impact people on the ground? And I think for me, just as a scholar, I'm interested in that. But then of course, also from a personal level, would love to reconnect with the culture, with a newfound lens of history in mind to really see Taiwan's industrialization and history for what it is.
Well, can I add on to that? Sorry, I really resonated with that because, for example, from the Chinese Empire history perspective or Japanese Empire perspective, Taiwan really emerged as a margin, right? But if you only look at Taiwan in it by itself, it's, as you were saying, then a whole new different picture opens up when you're looking at Taiwan not as the margin. In fact, we create our own margin. The way we marginalize migrant workers, indigenous population, women, gender minorities. So it's a total different dynamic when you were able to look at Taiwan that way in itself. Sorry, Tiffany.
No, it's okay. I was just gonna basically say the same thing. For me, it's a lot about like culture and finding more about what like not only what it means to be Taiwanese here, but like what do people on the island, what do we want, and sort of forging more of this. For me, being Taiwanese sort of means like being this bridge between, the U.S. and Taiwan. So a lot of my work has to do with, being an ambassador here for Taiwan. And so it not only allows me to, be more connected and find out who I am, but, sort of allowing our generation to become more aware of Taiwan's contributions and in general.
I think the microphone's coming around, but in the meantime.
Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, I think we'll take this question first and then your question.
Thank you. My name's Michael Tai, and I want to say I really relate to your story, Tiffany. One of my early experiences growing up amongst a bunch of white students was when the ball at recess got kicked out of bounds, and it was someone's turn to fetch it. Someone said to me, "You're the Chinese kid, so you get it." And that was the first time I was made aware that we're always going to be treated as the other by many people. In more recent times, attention has shifted on Taiwan. A few months ago, OpenAI founder Sam Altman, they were talking about raising $7 trillion, and a lot of people in the AI community where I work started joking that, oh, for $7 trillion, we can just buy Taiwan. And I had to go on social media at the time and say, I don't care if you're offering $7 trillion, Taiwan's not for sale. So, I mean, how do we really forge this, the Taiwanese identity and the Taiwanese founding myth so that we are seen as more than just, oh, the provider of high-end chips, or, oh, you're just a pawn between the US and China superpower conflict? Like, where's the foundation that we stand on to push back against that?
That's a very good question. I think I'm personally still navigating that as well, because even as Miss Asia USA, a lot of the time I'm told to actually hide my Taiwanese identity, and that's very difficult for me because as a public figure, it's hard to hide who I am when that was the reason why I decided to, be on this platform. But going back to your question of how can Taiwan basically just be more recognized other than our contributions, I think, the point of doing all this is not to instigate, more tension or more war. It's basically to find that balance. And for me, what I found is just promoting, I guess, our culture and our heritage, making it more about cultural representation, I think inevitably will actually make more people aware of, the significance and contributions Taiwan has made and recognize that. And so I think at the moment, that's what I've found to be the right balance, but that's something I'm still definitely trying to find. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I may add, I totally agree. I think we have so much more to offer than just the chess piece between international major powers. So for example, we are the first Asian country to legalize gay marriage, right? Mm-hmm. And also we managed to democratize ourselves even when we're not recognized as a normal nation state. And also the state is actually actively engaging with transitional justice on indigenous population and also on the whiter wrongdoings as well, though there's mixed feelings about that effort. But still, we're doing that. So I think there's so much more we can bring to the table, the historical, the cultural nuances, much more than just the international chess piece.
I agree. And sorry. No. Okay. I agree. And also adding on to that, our healthcare system, something that I think we could really emphasize. Mm-hmm. We had our first female president already. There's so much more we can offer. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm curious, as someone who teaches on the other coast, and I have a question about the generational difference. So on the one hand, I'm hearing that you want to bring visibility to Taiwanese Americans, which is also kind of Taiwan, versus Taiwanese American. And so how much do you feel that you have to straddle the kind of cultural war that we're seeing now with identity politics and with woke in the United States? And how much do you see also that you have a foot in basic questions about area studies, actually knowing what's happening outside the United States? And how do you traverse that? That's question number one. My other question that's really curious to me is, a lot of your generation, if I may generalize, is they feel like geopolitics is not their war, the current geopolitics. it's Cold War, and they feel they have to inherit this particular, old nation-based conflict, whereas their aspiration, their concern is actually much greater when you think about the climate or the environment or the future. So I also wonder how much, like, when you're studying and getting ready to teach or getting ready to go out in the world, like, how does a university suit you at the moment?
I can start off. As I was mentioning, last year when I was the co-chair of our undergraduate student group, we asked them what they wanted out of the club, and history/political awareness was an option we gave them, and it was not chosen. And I think there is a sense of first, there is a type of healing and community and being in a room of all these Taiwanese people who on some level have had the same lived experience as you, on some level also have like mixed feelings trying to identify themselves when people ask them like, oh, what's your race, like exactly what to say. And I think on some level that has to happen first. But sometimes there are things that happen. So I remember my freshman year, when we were advertising for our night market, we put up a post on Facebook, and TCS, our logo has the Taiwanese ROC flag in it, and that post was taken down because it was labeled as political propaganda, even though all we were doing was just advertising our night market. And so when we witnessed that, it felt like a direct attack in the sense of like we weren't even allowed to identify that way. And when the threat is that existential, then you don't need to be political in order to be like, I need to be vocal about this. And so I think for many Taiwanese, even though like being politically active in some sort of way may not be exactly what they're looking for, I think there is a sense of this need for pride that our club is really trying to foster by providing spaces where we can come together and celebrate our culture together.
Awesome. I think we have time for maybe one small last question, and then we're going to go to a break. But feel free to stick around. I mean, we're all going to be here for the rest of the day, so feel free to ask those questions during the break.
Hi. My question is actually kind of related to what you just asked. As Taiwanese, as students and with this Taiwan program, I was just wondering, have you seen any backlash from like Chinese American, maybe white Shenren Taiwanese, about like Taiwanese identity on campus? I mean, you kind of alluded that kind of backlash against the ROC flag, so I was just wondering if you could elaborate to that, because I've had even my own debates with my friends on that.
You guys can go first. I don't have specific ones.
Mine is more off campus, not on. Yeah, you can talk off campus. Okay,
Don't be shy.
I think like from my personal experience, I think as a club we're kind of separate from the Chinese student organizations, and I don't think we really receive any, like negative publicly negative things from them. Like they also participate in our night market every year, and we're very happy to see them. Like on an interpersonal level, of course, I too have had the debates with my own classmates from a variety of places about Taiwan status. But I think as a whole, what I see in our general student body is there's a lot of support for self-determination, for the right to have a democratic government. I think all these things are very much considered universal human rights, and so I think as a whole, I haven't really witnessed any backlash against Taiwan having its own program.
I agree. Like on campus, it's very like supportive. Of course, I've also had like my discussions and like debates with my friends or classmates, but I've received a lot of it more like with the work I've done outside. Especially, like I said, when I won Miss Asia, there was a lot of backlash. People saying, just saying all sorts of things, as people always do, on the internet. And I think it's really, it's difficult to navigate because how how much can we really speak on on Taiwan's behalf? Because I think a lot of the times when I attend all these events and everything, I mean, there are many instances where people have been like, oh, like, where are you from? I'm like, oh, Taiwan. They're like, oh, no, you're Chinese. But I think that's all part of like just the Taiwanese experience in general, and that's something that, you know, we're still working on.
Okay. So on campus, whenever I make friend with a Chinese student, there's a test I have to go through when I bring them to my house, which has a huge I support Taiwan independence flag. And I see what kind of conversation we can have. So that's on a personal level. And however, I'm very supportive of Chinese activism, especially on campus and abroad, especially when the white paper movement broke out last year as well. So I still see a lot of opportunities of connection with a lot of liberal Chinese students on campus who were actually very involved in activism and democratization of China, although they couldn't really, there's a lot of sensitivity going around that because of the surveillance from the Chinese government. But still, I see campus as a space that those kind of opportunities, bridging, sharing different kinds of activist experiences and also histories of Taiwan and China as a space that we can have that kind of exchange happening. Yeah.
I agree. And even some of the work, like I do a lot of like partnerships with, you know, like different cultures in general, like for example, some Chinese organizations, some like Japanese organizations. And so it's all more about like promoting unity and like diversity and making sure that we have a space, everyone has a space to like talk.
So that concludes our student panel. We're going to have a short coffee break, I think, and we'll be here for the fourth panel.